Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. On this channel, I get a lot of flack for exposing myself, the truth about the Jedi and their very kind of closed-minded view of the galaxy, along with the various abuses they carried out while they were in power. Some people have even accused me of being a Sith apologizer and of being involved in yellow journalism, clearly racist. I'm also totally not a journalist. 85% of 32% of the things I say are complete nonsense, and the rest of it is just the mad ramblings of an ancient Sith Lord that might have possessed me while I was using the ample services provided within a Denny's bathroom. And so today's question is not about whether Denny's has taken over the traditional mom and pop diner through very predatory corporate behavior. It's about why people keep having terrible experiences inside of Denny's bathrooms. Look guys, it's Pride Month and it's definitely something we need to talk about. We've gone a long way in the last decade or so. Things have gotten a lot better for the LGBT community, especially for the L's, the G's, and the B's. But for the T's, it's still pretty crazy out there. Meet Jasmina Saavedra. She doesn't have a wiki page because she lost her election for a seat in the US House to represent California's 44th Congressional District. She decided it was okay to out a trans person inside the bathrooms of a Denny, voted one of the worst places in America to visit after the state of Connecticut. Now it's perfectly okay for Jasmina Saavedra to hold religious views that being transsexual is immoral. I obviously don't agree or care for her views, but religious freedom is definitely something that's clearly outlined by our founding fathers as an important thing, and so they fought for it for centuries, despite the fact that America's massive Wolverine and vampire population was the more present danger. But even though Jasmina Saavedra has every right to have her religious views on transsexuals, going to a public bathroom with a camera phone and exposing a private citizen in a very private way is a completely dick move. In this moment, Jasmina is not trying to champion Christian values or family values. She is trying to destroy this poor woman in order to gain power for her own election. You see, Jasmina has the same quality that I've seen in every capable politician: the ability to destroy someone else's life for their own personal gain and power. It's also one of the clearer signs that that individual you suspect is a Sith is actually a Sith. Did you know that human beings are predisposed to being conservative and progressive? Obviously, environmental factors and parenting will affect a person's worldview, but we definitely are not a blank slate. For instance, conservatives are generally more cautious when it comes to approving new ideas and more aware of danger. It's not a positive or negative thing, it's just a personality trait. It was conservatives like Winston Churchill who understood the threat that Hitler was, but at the same time, it was mostly conservatives who expanded the US government's surveillance abilities post 9/11. Progressives are more open-minded and more willing to accept change, even if that change might be negative. It was progressive whites like Jonathan Daniels who crossed racial barriers when he sacrificed his life for a young black teen who was about to get killed by a shotgun-wielding pro-segregationist. It was also progressives like Mao Zedong who wanted to transform China into a modern country, but instead killed more people than Stalin and Hitler combined through his crazy policies and so-called cultural reform. In each positive example, conservative or progressive, the individual in question is trying to better society around them. Jonathan Daniels joined the civil rights movement because he truly cared about equality in the United States. From an optics point of view, seeing a white person protesting with a black person makes this battle no longer a race war, but a battle between right and wrong. During the Battle of Britain, perhaps a more open-minded and progressive politician would have accepted Hitler's terms for surrender. But Winston Churchill, conservative and ever suspicious of outsiders, decided to fight on and resist this fascist dictator, perhaps saving the entirety of Western Europe because of his resolve. The powers that come with the actions of both of these individuals is only an afterthought and not the sole purpose or reward for their actions. But then if we look at each of the negative examples, conservative or progressive, what we see as an end result is power. Mao Zedong created a cult of personality around himself and sought to expand the Communist Party's influence by creating the Cultural Revolution, a destabilizing event that turned Chinese people against their neighbors and caused massive famines. It also got rid of the middle class, which is the key to any thriving representative government, and made massive amounts of the population dependent on the government for basic needs, which leads to the dystopian China that we see today. The Patriot Act, on the other hand, took advantage of the political climate in the United States post 9/11. Democrats and Republicans alike were crying out for blood and revenge. But instead of really protecting us, the Patriot Act lifted many of the restrictions in place that guard American citizens from unconstitutional surveillance and searches. Now, people might seek power for different reasons, but at its core, power gives an individual the ability to control their surroundings. In many ways, each and every one of us are striving for power and control over our lives and the various things that affect us. Seeking power can be something as simple as looking for a promotion in your job. It doesn't necessarily make you evil, but it does give you more control over your own future. Taken to an extreme, the pursuit of power becomes the Sith ideology, which is very much based on the simple idea that the world is completely chaotic and the only way you can really protect yourself is by being at the top. Which is also why people who seek complete control of others, like the Chinese Communist Party or Dick Cheney, ultimately did so because of their intense and real fear of losing control. Now, just because someone looks strong and brash on the outside doesn't mean that there isn't a small little Winnie Pooh hiding on the inside. Fear is perhaps one of the most natural feelings an individual can have, and it's directly tied to our evolutionary makeup. It does a good job at keeping us away from danger. Individuals without fear generally don't get to pass on their genetic material. But an excessive amount of fear can lead to the dark side and also crazy behavior. The Jedi definitely got that part right. Anakin's fear of Padme dying actually became a self-fulfilling prophecy. In Legends, it's actually Palpatine's fear of the impending Yuzhang Vong invasion that makes him create the Death Star and this massive Imperial military, which ultimately led to his downfall. Although clearly his style of governance was overreaching and brutal and non-sustainable, Palpatine was driven by the fear of a superior enemy force. You see, behind all of that arrogance and power, the average Sith Lord was just like any other being, full of massive insecurities. As a matter of fact, the more insecure a Sith Lord was, the more likely they would pursue fear and control. I mean, if you do take a look at government systems, a pure democracy is one of the scariest things a person in charge can do, and it takes a massive amount of courage to give up power instead of taking it. But fear ultimately is just a subcategory in the larger problem, which is human emotions. Fear is an emotion, and emotions are what make human beings so much better than ruthless, cold-hearted dolphins. But like everything in life, passion needs a little bit of moderation, and when people get extremely passionate about things, we start to see the extreme behaviors of a Sith or a Jedi. A person who is extremely emotional also lets their emotions guide their actions is in danger of constantly falling into the dark side. Even positive emotions like love can turn to negative ones like attachment, obsession, or jealousy. Several dark side forms of lightsaber combat are literally fueled by these types of negative emotions. So if you know someone who loves feeding off of chaos and anger and terrible emotions, most likely that individual is a Sith Lord. At the end of the day, emotional people make emotional arguments, which honestly might be more compelling or probably louder. But these type of arguments are usually made from self-appointed positions of authority or completely based off of anecdotal evidence and not rationale. A Sith Lord will tell you that they hate weakness, but if you ask them what they think weakness is, well, their definition is quite superficial. Weakness to them is being physically weak or being kind to others who are physically weak. In their view, weak people are unable to take from others, so others will take from them. A Sith Lord is very likely to prescribe into extreme forms of libertarian views. I love, in theory, the idea of limited government and no police. But let's be honest, if you actually believe in that, you're probably not thinking about the, weaker individuals in society who do depend on services from the government to help them out. And perhaps the most telling sign an individual is a Sith Lord is their inability to understand that empathy for those who are weaker than you is a strength and not a weakness. Interestingly enough, the Jedi aren't that much more empathetic either. They're also quite emotionally stunted in my opinion. I mean, who saves a child slave but then leaves his mom to be brutalized by sand people? And this is a guy who makes a living from saving slaves from human traffickers. Ultimately, only Siths deal in absolutes, which is actually a statement from a Jedi, which is an absolute in itself. The Sith and Jedi do not represent the good and bad side of the Force. Instead, they represent two crazy extremes in the Force. The Jedi were so terrified of the dark side that they completely shut themselves off of it and stopped learning about it. Which created the Sith, who despite all their pride and ego, were a reactionary movement created by exiles who were kicked out of the Cool Club. Both of these organizations are severely messed up, as is any organization that tries to control its members through a very restrictive but at the same time arbitrary and vague set of rules. The reason why I didn't show you the Sith code until the end of this video is because it's a load of propaganda crap created by manipulative evil space wizards who want to convince you that their product is the best. The same goes for the Jedi code. It's just another brand with a different tagline. The reality is that you, Steve, are a very unique and special snowflake, and I say that with zero sarcasm. Seriously, there is no one like you in the world, Steve. Sure, there are many people out there who might be watching this show also while wearing their underpants, but only you wear 2 pairs of underpants on top of each other, which technically makes the outside layer shorts, and therefore it's not indecent exposure if you go out in public in them.